Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing quite well. I want to sit down and make a little bit of a video for you about how you can create your own dynamic EQ inside of Bitwig Studio, or at least how you can sort of create your own dynamic EQ. So what I'm going to do in this video is just go through some examples really quickly, set these things up for you so you can see what's going on, you can hear what's going on, and at the end of the video, if you're already bored to tears, you can turn it off, but I will go through and talk a little bit as to why this maybe isn't so much a dynamic EQ and what sort of uses this might have and what sort of uses it might not have, because I imagine a lot of people might click on this video thinking that we're creating something very much for like mastering, but actually that's not the case here. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish. You'll see that with the dynamic EQ that I'm going to use, it's really more for like a tonal shaping characteristic, or for maybe an alternative to like a sidechain compressor or something like that. And the only other thing I want to say just at the beginning is that with anything in audio, there's always more than one way to accomplish something. And just because there's more than one way doesn't mean that there's a right way or there's a wrong way. What you might find is that in some cases, setting something up like this is more effective than having a sidechain compressor. But in other situations, it may not be, because you might really want the sound of that effect. And I know for me personally, there would be times when I would use this and times when I certainly wouldn't. So just always keep an open mind to things. So here's the loop that we have to start. So nothing really exciting, nothing special. Now, to create any kind of like dynamic anything, what we need is we need to have a source signal that is going to control an additional parameter. So inside of Bitwig Studio, that device that we're going to use is the audio mod. So how the audio mod works is you take a device input, or just an input from any one of these tracks, and by default, it's going to be the track itself. So if I mute this, you can see that is what's going to feed into this. And then you can use that and use the variation in the signal to control an external effect, or any effect that we drop into this slot here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first just set this up with the kick drum so you can see and understand what I'm doing, and then we'll get more into the dynamic EQ side of things. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to choose the kick pre for right now, just so that when we're playing back, we're getting signal, even if this track is muted. So we can see that there. Perfect. So just for the sake of examples here, we're not going to be doing any EQ. We could, but it would be used more for like a creative effect. So maybe I will throw an EQ on there. We'll just do that first, because right now what we'd be creating is actually like a dynamic EQ in its literal sense, as in there is a dynamic coming in and it is triggering the EQ. Now it's not the source signal itself, which we'll get into, but it's that of the kick drum. So I'll just like choose a random frequency here, choose the modulation, jack that all the way up. So that was for the kick drum. So even to my ear, what that does is it actually makes this particular synth line more exciting, because you're getting this extra dynamic movement that you didn't have before. And really, that's the main reason why you're dropping something like a compressor onto a track in the first place. In some cases, it's to level out, an uneven performance. And inside the computer with electronic music, that's a lot more rare, because you have total control over the majority of the performances. So when you are using a compressor, and in this case, we have more of like an expander going on here, what we're doing is we're kind of setting this up to time with the kick drum. So each time the kick drum hits, we're having this extra sort of push and pull going on with the synth line. So I'm going to get back to that in a second. But the other way we could use this just for fun, more creatively, to make this loop more exciting, is we could take something like, I don't know, a ladder filter, and this thing adds just additional gain even if you just have it on here in its default state. So I'm going to turn the post down by a couple dB, and then I'm also going to add in, let's do like a delay, put the mix down to 0. Something like this. And now in theory, if we turn this on and off, we shouldn't really hear a difference. So, oh, whoops, wrong thing. So wow, that ladder filter really does. I guess maybe we have the volume, maybe went too far there, but regardless, here's what we're gonna do. All right, let's go ahead and turn this all back up. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So I can do something like modulate the frequency and the resonance every time this kick drum is hitting to add some excitement. And what it also might do is have the effect of giving us more energy, hearing the kick drum come through a bit more as well. So I'll go in here, I'll modulate the filter frequency, I'll pull up on the resonance. Let's take a listen. And now the envelope follower is really the most important part of the audio mod, because this attack and release is going to let us kind of sync this to the music, to keep it more musical, to keep it on beat, to make it exciting. Or if you want to do something different and not so much keep it on beat, you could play around with this a little. We can choose like sort of the depth here if we want more. So that's kind of cool. Maybe also I'll add in a little bit of this delay here. So now the really cool thing I could do, because that would also get kind of annoying over time, is I can modulate specifically the release parameter here, automate the release parameter, and you can take a listen to what kind of happens. So I'll choose a release control, and let's just have this fade up. And let's also have this increase on the feedback. So by the time this finishes, we'll get a little bit more of a tail running at the end. Okay, cool. So let's try it out. Yeah, I took that too far, didn't I? So as you can tell, it takes a little bit of like just finessing to get this to sound just right. But when I did a video before I started this, I actually got this to really kind of sync absolutely perfectly. I'm sure I can never replicate it now, but that's the general idea. Now what we're going to do is actually go into more of like a dynamic EQ following the same principle. But this is going to be a little bit more interesting, because what we're going to do here is tonally shape this kick drum. But we're going to do so by using its actual dynamic, which is really cool. You're going to hear how well this works. It's pretty incredible what you can do with this. So I'll go in here, choose the audio mod. We're getting the source signal itself. So now all I need to do is add in an EQ. I don't know. I'll add in an EQ5. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for like a low frequency that I like. So I might also like turn all of these guys down a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to put this back down to 0, decrease a little bit on the output. And now what I'm going to do is create my little dynamic EQ of sorts by going in here and actually modulating this. And I'm going to bring it up. So we'll over exaggerate it for the sake of the video so you can really hear what's going on. Let's try to get this to work. So that's way too long. I want to bounce along with the music. Boom, boom. Okay, so maybe I want to add a little bit more snap in as well. Go and find a presence frequency that works. Definitely not that one. I think this will be a pretty good place. Obviously, you'll spend more time kind of finessing to find what you want. And we'll turn it back on, do the same kind of a thing here. You could even add separate ones if you have a different sort of envelope idea that you want. But I think this should work well in both cases because I'm trying to get the front attack here. Increase it a little more. And the other thing I could do is, let's say there was a frequency in here that I didn't like. Let's just say it's at 400. It probably wouldn't be, but I could go in and I could actually pull this down as well. You can hear how we've completely reshaped this thing. And then again, you're just going to go in here and kind of finesse it a little bit. And just like that, you have a totally different sounding kick drum with this one little effect here. And it's really amazing what you can do. So like you can almost take a lot of kicks, even a kick sound that you may not like at all, find a couple of frequencies in there, and then do this little technique of sorts, and you have yourself a totally different sound. Now, the other thing I can do is go back to this polysynth part here, have an idea of what I increased. So I increased at 62.4 and 6.27K. So what I'm going to do here is create a little bit of an alternative, like a more logical alternative to like a sidechain compressor, because with a sidechain compressor, what we're doing is we're actually just dropping the entire signal, right? It doesn't care about frequency. The whole signal is just coming down. So let me close this one up. So if I go from the kick, we'll over-exaggerate it actually. So the whole thing is coming down there, and in a lot of cases that's what you want, and it actually has a pretty cool effect, and it sounds interesting. I like it when people sometimes way overdo like a sidechain compressor, but in this case we're going to do something a little bit more subtle. So this might be something you'd use if you actually are not working with like electronic instruments. Like you might have a guitar part or something and it's getting in the way of the kick for whatever reason. You could do this and it would actually work very effectively, and it can be very transparent if you use the right sort of EQ, because you don't necessarily have to use the Bitwig Studio EQ for this, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So just keep on trying to whet your appetite for things to come. So I'll go in here again. I'll add in our EQ2 this time, because I know that those frequencies were what, 62.5 and let's see, 6.27K. So 6270. And I'll choose each of these into a bell. And I don't even remember what I had here, but that's fine. We're not going to go too crazy with this for now. I just want you guys to get a sense for what this does. So I'll go in here and we'll dramatically cut these frequencies out. And the cool thing about this is these frequencies may not be all that important to the sound itself. So when the kick drum is coming through, you're really just making room for it. You're not even really jeopardizing too much the integrity of this synth sound that we've got going on. So oh, idiot. I have to also have it set up from the kick. I'm like, why is it not bouncing properly? Okay, here we go. Now this should work. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. So now I would take this out, bring it back in. And if you want here, I can very quickly reset up the like sidechain compressor we just had going before, and then we can A/B between the two of these, and you'll hear the difference. Let's make it a little more rampy. Okay, so let's see if this works. So this is with the sidechain compressor, and that's the audio mod. So you can hear how much more this still is able to cut through and stay in the mix. Now that may not be what you want for dramatic effect, but that's the basic idea. So that's pretty much all this tutorial is covering for you. It's showing you how you can very easily set up a basic dynamic EQ using the audio mod and Bitwig Studio's own EQ2 or EQ5 device.